It is currently 5:46 a.m. It is about 25 degrees. I woke up like 10 minutes ago, prayed the Hajj in the house, and we're about to head out now to pray Fajr at the mosque. So I'll catch you guys there.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Alright, so we just got done praying Fajr at the mosque. It's now like 6:30 a.m. There's no better feeling than that. I'm so tired. I was so sore from the gym last night, and I almost didn't make it. But I woke up, did wudu. I came here, and alhamdulillah, there's no better feeling than coming here and praying. Felt so close. Felt great. You get to watch the beautiful sunrise as well. It pays off. Uh, Everything comes with it. Now I'll probably go home, chill, maybe take a nap because I got another swim workout at 9 a.m. So, you know, felt good to still be here though. It's funny, like almost everybody, we're always thinking about what we're gonna do tomorrow, how's tomorrow gonna go, or what are we even gonna do today. And I think it's so funny because everybody always plans and thinks about tomorrow when they're not even guaranteed tomorrow. And I feel like that's always been like such a crazy thing about death is that we know that every single soul is promised death, but concept of death, the idea of death, is something that's still hard to comprehend sometimes, especially when it comes to somebody you love. Um, if I'm being honest, this is something that I just kept pushing further and further away. I just kept pushing it back. I guess because a part of me didn't want to relive what I want to say. But I want to talk about my grandma. I want to talk about my grandma, but it's funny because there aren't the words to describe my grandmother and the type of person she was, I feel like don't exist. How do you describe somebody that you love so much? One or two words doesn't do somebody like that justice. My grandma was such a crucial part of me growing up. That was like my second mother. Your grandparents are like your second parents. I remember as a child so vividly, we would go and sleep over at my grandparents' house, and we would wake up every morning to the smell of tea, to the sound of the Quran playing on the TV downstairs, and just waking up in that warmth. Nothing ever compared to that feeling. And I always used to think about it because it was such a core memory in my head. Like, every morning that went like that was so perfect. You go downstairs and they're asking us what we want to eat. And I always think back to those memories like, dang, like, I miss waking up and feeling all of that. And it's crazy because, like, I didn't think I would experience that again because, you only get to be a kid once. I remember last summer we had to stay with my grandparents for a month because my uncle was out of the country. I remember in that 1 month I got to be a kid again because while we were staying with my grandparents for that 1 month, boom, just like that, I'm waking up to the smell of tea, to the sound of the Quran playing, to that feeling of that warmth. You go downstairs, my grandparents are asking me what I want to eat for breakfast, and I'm 20 now, but I still feel like I'm that 6, 7, 8-year-old kid waking up in those same situations. And for that one whole month, I got to relive my childhood again. There was nothing better than that, than that feeling, that warmth that I would feel every day waking up. There was nothing that compared to that feeling. That month was so much fun. That month, that month in my eyes was a blessing from Allah. Not knowing what would come after that 1 month of happiness. My grandma started getting sick towards the end of that month, towards the end of August. And it wasn't nothing crazy at first, I remember. It was, just small, minor issues. She wasn't feeling the best. I remember we would go to the hospital, and they honestly wouldn't know what was wrong. They would just say, oh, it's this or it's that. They would send her home. But then my grandma would just come back to the hospital because she wasn't feeling well. She was getting worse. And my grandma hated the hospital too. It was the funny thing, but she was asking take me to the hospital. I don't feel the best. We would take her, and sometimes they would keep her for a week, keep her for 2 weeks. We don't know what's wrong. Her reports are showing up fine. We don't know why she's feeling the way she is. And it went on like that for a while. And then I remember it just kind of plummeted over the next 5 months from August. Wallahi, I promise you, there was not a single feeling of happiness that I felt. Because every single day from those 5 months, I watched my grandma get sicker each and every single day. It was always hard because my grandma, she would be in the hospital, and then it got to the point where they started keeping her longer. From 1 week to 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And my grandma always would just talk about wanting to go home because she just hated the hospital. She Just wanted to go home. Then I remember my grandma got so bad, like it got to the point where my grandma wouldn't even eat some days, and I always would think, I would always think, I would always think like, how is this the same person that raised and fed me as a kid? I'm watching somebody that was my second mother get sicker and sicker every single day, and I feel like there was nothing I could do. How does somebody deal with that? There's no written rules for how a person is supposed to handle that type of stuff. My grandma was getting so sick, you know, that we didn't even know when she would come out of the hospital. And it got to the point where we were spending nights there. People were taking turns. I remember one time me and my grandpa, we were there for like 10 hours just with my grandma. And my grandpa would try to bug her a little bit, try to make her laugh. But it felt like each and every single day my grandma, she just she just kept getting weaker and weaker. And for her to produce a smile or a laugh would just cause her too much energy that she didn't have. I could never watch my grandma. I would see her getting sick. She wouldn't get better. So when I would go to the hospital and sit there in the room with my grandma, some days I would just look outside the window. I would just stare outside the window for hours. I just remember my grandma would keep talking about, when are you guys gonna take me home? When are you guys gonna take me home? My grandpa would tell her, he would tell her, yo, you'll get better soon, inshallah, and we'll take you home. What do you want to eat? We'll go home and make it. Dealing with something like that, it's so hard to think about other things because you're so focused on this one thing, on this one person. I remember they told us towards the end that my grandma had bladder cancer. And that hit me that hit me like a bullet in my chest. I don't want to sound inconsiderate, but to me cancer is like, nobody in my family has ever gotten cancer. So I hear cancer and I'm like, cancer? People in the movies get cancer. People, that's not something that happens in our family. My grandmother having cancer at stage 4. It was so hard for me to understand because I'm like, how does somebody so loving, so kind, how does somebody deal with that? Why are they given this hardship? Cancer. I remember, I think it was a week after that. I remember it was a Saturday. Me and my younger brother, we woke up in the morning, we swam, and then we went to work after. And I remember we came home from work, and as I'm driving home, my mom calls me. She says, "Yo, I want to go and see my grandma." And at this point, they had sent my grandmother home, but they had sent a hospital bed home and all those monitors home so that they could monitor her at home because my grandma just wanted to be home so bad. So my mom's like, "Yo, I want to go see my mom, your grandma." I tell my mom, I said, "Yo, we're tired, Yanni, give us like an hour. Let me take a nap and then we can go after." Mom was like, "No, we have to go now." So I remember we came home, changed our clothes, and went and saw my grandma. It was about 6 o'clock. We come in, assalamu alaikum. I give my grandma a kiss. She gives me a kiss back. I hug her. Same thing happens with my siblings. And we're sitting down. My mom is bugging my grandma, messing with her, trying to get a reaction out of her, make her laugh. My grandma just says, "I just want to lay down. I just want to lay down." And I'm thinking there, we're sitting there, trying to make her feel better. And then boom, just like that, 20 minutes later, I would have never thought 20 minutes later, just like that, so fast, My grandma goes into cardiac arrest in front of all of us. And one of the fear I felt, I saw death. I saw death in front of me in a way that I've never seen before. I saw death. I saw death be in that room and I didn't know what to do. I remember I called 911. Like, yo, 911, my grandma just went unconscious. I don't know what to do. They said, give your grandma CPR until the ambulance gets there. So I remember giving her CPR for I don't know how long. And I felt like every time I was compressing on her chest or blowing air into her mouth, it felt like each push, each breath was a dua to Allah. Ya Allah, please save my grandma. Please bring my grandma back. Please bring her heart back. Ambulance comes. They were able to get a heartbeat again. Rush her to the hospital. They tell us, yo, my grandma lost oxygen to her brain for an hour. So my grandma was hooked up onto life support. She was basically unresponsive besides small movements in the eyes and her mouth. And I remember the next 3 days, me and my uncle, we would spend the night, and my brother and my mom would spend the days there. And I remember the nights there, you can't sleep. I remember being in that ICU room, so cold. Me and my uncle, we would take turns sitting with my grandma because we didn't want her to be alone. They would only allow one person, so we would take turns. I remember sitting in that room with my grandma, and I would think, before all this, I remember every time I would greet my grandmother, I would always say, Ammi, you're getting so old. Look at you, you're getting old, as a joke. And she would always laugh and say, yeah, I am getting old, but it's okay. Then I remember being in that hospital room with her, and I would say, Ammi, if you can hear my voice, please come back. Ammi, you're so young. You're still so young, you know? Ammi, you're so young, you don't have to go now. The next few days went by like that. The next few days were full of so much pain. I hated seeing my grandma hooked up to all those machines. I remember the doctors told us that 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 my grandma would not be able to recover from this. So I remember we made the decision to take her off life support. And I remember being in that room, watching my grandma take her last breaths again. And I'm like, I'm still stuck on what happened on that Saturday. Watching my grandma's heart stop in front of me. And then in the hospital, I'm seeing it all over again. I was still trying to process everything that had happened. Before passing away, my grandmother was able to smile not once, but 4 times before she passed away. So that gave me some kind of clarity, some kind of closure, because she was happy to leave. The grief that comes with that, it's always hard to try to navigate through. I remember I was so angry. I was so mad. Why does somebody so kind have to go through such a painful death? My grandma was in pain for every single one of those 5 days. And on top of the pain that happened in that room on Saturday and then in the hospital hooked up to all those machines, the cancer, why does my grandma deserve that? She's the most kindest person, the purest heart. I'd be angry. I wouldn't understand it. But then I remember, in Islam, when a person gets sick, their sins are forgiven. And in Islam, it's mentioned that a person that passes away from a sickness, something like cancer, dies as a martyr, a shaheed. And in Islam, if you die as a martyr, you are guaranteed Jannah. So I would think, when you pick flowers for a garden,
you always want to pick the best ones. And I would think, Allah picked my grandmother to be one of His flowers in His garden, which is Jannah. Because that is the greatest garden a person could ever enter. And my grandmother was lucky enough to be chosen to go to that garden. I miss my grandmother every day. I think about my grandmother every day. All I can do now is pray for her, and I hope I can make her proud one day. All my grandmother ever would want to do is talk to us, see us. My grandmother would call, say, "How are you doing? I just wanted to make sure you got home from work." Now I have this emptiness that I'm trying to feel, that I'm trying to understand. I wish I could speak to my grandmother again. I wish I could hear her voice again. The thing that stuck out most to me about that whole situation was to never take anything for granted. I want to make my grandmother proud. So I want to become the type of man she would be proud of. And I hope one day when I meet her again, I'm able to tell her about all these stories that she missed out on.